What's up, everybody? This is Jay, and this video is the true life story of OG Mack, aka Omar Portee. Now, Omar Portee founded the United Blood Nation, and the United Blood Nation was the faction of Bloods on the East Coast of New York. Now, in this video, I'm gonna recap his life, and then I'm gonna break down some different things and key moments that led him to what became the leader of the United Blood Nation. Now, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, bang that bell, sit back, relax. I'm gonna break it down. Let's get into it. Now, in the 90s, a lot of black folks was trying to come together with black unity. We had the Million Man March in October of 95, and it seemed that a lot of the black community was trying to come together. Reverend Louis Farrakhan put together the Million Man March, and it seemed that things were looking in a positive direction for the black community for a moment. Because at the time of the march, black men were murdered at a rate 8 times higher than white men. By the next year, more black male high school dropouts were incarcerated than employed. It was hundreds in prison on Rikers Island in New York. Now, Rikers Island is an island in New York City that's actually a giant jail. The island has 9 to 10 jails on it, and it has some of the most violent criminals from New York City. I'm talking about robbery, rape, murder, arson, lots of gang activity as well. I mean, it's a self-contained prison city. It's surrounded by razor wire and water. It's like a modern Alcatraz, although a larger version. Now, OG Mack made a new identity while he was incarcerated in Rikers Island. Omar Portee was his real name. Now, he was a career criminal most of his life, and he was known to be brutal yet charismatic. His people loved him. He saw his fellow African Americans as being victimized in prison by the other gangs. See, the Latin Kings controlled the prison. The Latin Kings claim to be the oldest and largest Latino street gang in the world. There's different ones like the Trinitarios, that's a Dominican gang, and the NETAS, who are a Puerto Rican gang. But out of all the Hispanic gangs, the Latin Kings can be found in more than 150 cities. Omar Portee, he founded the United Blood Nation in 1993. He wanted to take on the Latin Kings in prison is part of the reason why he founded the United Blood Nation. Now, blood means togetherness and unity. They had the B, which meant better, the L, look, the O, out, the other O, or, and the D, die. The Bloods date back to LA in the 1960s. The Bloods and Crips are the 2 most dominant black street gangs in the United States. Portee brought the Bloods east from LA to New York, and Omar Portee got involved after 2 first-degree robbery convictions. He found a lot of politics going on in jail with the Hispanic gangs and black gangs, and they didn't get along. He started planting a flag, aka claiming territory, for the UBN while in prison. He realized one way to have power was to control the phone bank. No one was allowed to use the phone unless you paid them, and as a prisoner, that was your only lifeline to the outside world. It was a big step to controlling the island. When you can control the phones, you basically run the show. In 1996, a year after the Million Man March, OG Mack began exacting punishment to anyone that broke his rules. It started with a wooden letter from a Scrabble game that was shaved down into a sharp blade weapon. He began to slash his victims in the face when they broke the rules as a way of punishment and intimidation, leaving his victims scarred for life. The wounds were so bad, they got the nickname Buck 50 because it usually took around 150 stitches to treat the wounds. These attacks were not random and was done with surgical precision, with wounds usually started from the lip all the way to the ear. He makes his followers to do the same, and soon they begin to create weapons and use them in the same manner. Some inmates created weapons, some even snuck some in their glove box, aka rectum. Within a few months, Mack had a few hundred inmates and they began to control the prison with a population of nearly 10,000. This is when he changed his name from Omar Portee to OG Mack, with the OG standing for Original Gangster. They transformed from prey to predators and began to do to the Latin Kings what the Latin Kings used to do to them. Before long, the culture in prison began to spill out into the streets of New York. It began to spread like wildfire. At one point, it was like 10 to 15,000 Bloods in New York City. He became the godfather in little time. He was 21 when the film Boys in the Hood came out. Now, we all know about the Bloods and the Crips are the two most dominant gangs in LA, with name recognition like Coke and Pepsi. By the time the film Boys in the Hood came out, he had already been locked up in Rikers Island for 2 armed robberies and released. He found his identity on the other side of the country. He was born in the Bronx and raised by his grandmother. His parents were not in his life, and his grandma had a hard time controlling him, so she sent him away to his relatives in California. Unlike Trey from Boys in the Hood, though, Portee, while in California, could not resist the lure of the streets. While in Cali, he was exposed to the gang culture and learned more about the Bloods and became indoctrinated. He would later bring all that he learned back to New York City. See, the Bloods were originally formed in the 60s, and their motivation in the beginning back in the day was purely self-preservation. They were almost always on the defensive against the Crips, their rivals. The Bloods and the original Crip homies, as they were first known, were collections of street kids from South Central LA in the beginning. Most of the original members were under 17 years old. OG StudderBoxx is an OG from the era of the late 70s to the end of the 90s. He said that a triple OG title is a form of respect. It comes from repping your street or set. It all originally was done to go against systemic racism and poverty, but ultimately turned to clashes with rival gangs and making money. In the beginning, it was groups of kids coming together from dysfunctional homes to feel a part of something and to have each other's back, because that was something they didn't have. Now, they defended each other, and if one set was weakened and short on soldiers, they would go reinforce that set with soldiers to help. By 1978, there were around 45 Crip sets compared to just 15 sets to the Bloods, and they were badly outnumbered. They were outnumbered 3-1 and began to develop a reputation of ruthlessness in order to survive. They began to engage in narcotics trafficking, murder, robbery, etc. Some say what set them apart was the horrific violence that they commit. It says that some soldiers for the Bloods began calling themselves CK for Crip Killers. In 1991, the year that Boys in the Hood came out, it was a record 771 gang-related killings in Los Angeles. Portee was in Los Angeles during that exact same time, taking all this in from the Bloods' perspective. A year after his grandma sent him to Cali, he came back to the Bronx, and while there, attempts to kill a rival gang member, but was unsuccessful. By this time, he had already had the gangster lifestyle in his DNA. He saw the Bloods as a brand that needed expansion and not just be a West Coast thing. He started out locally and built with his local crew, the 183 Jerome in the Bronx, or 1-8 Trey. He formed the 1-8 Trey gang. He might have thought of the name from his time in South Central, because one of the oldest sets of Crips is the 8 Trey, dating back to the 70s. Out west, you're born into a gang based on where you live and your parents. He wanted the exact same thing in New York. People wanted it as well. You know, he first attempted to expand the Bloods in New York, but it didn't last long because he was arrested not long after returning home on a weapons charge. He sees the Latin Kings had more people and ran the prison while he was inside Rikers Island. While the black gangs were spread out and not unified, he saw that as a reason and a way to bring them together. He got together with a Brooklyn-based gangster named Leonard Deadeye McKenzie. He convinced him to help unify all the black gangsters in prison, and together they began to build the empire from within the walls of Rikers. He used the knowledge and information he learned while out west as a blueprint to transform the gangs in NYC to Bloods. See, in 1988, Omar Portee was a 19-year-old from the Bronx facing first-degree robbery charges. Ironically, during the same time, a movie came out that would eventually represent his life called Colors. It was about the Bloods and Crips in LA. After his prison stint, he went to LA and began to live the actual life himself. In many ways, he was a visionary because he took the paradigm of the Bloods from the West Coast and flipped the script on the East Coast. He made it more structured. He figured out when you control the inside, you can control the outside. In the summer of '93, he began to answer only to OG Mack. OG is a title given when you're instrumental in starting a gang or bringing people together, or just down individual that handles business, or even someone that used to do that stuff and is older and has a lot of wisdom. It's a term of respect. When OG Mack got with Deadeye McKenzie in prison, they realized it was power in numbers. Allegedly, Deadeye got his name from his cloudy right pupil he received while living a life of crime. He was originally a member of the G-Shine gang in Brooklyn. By age 25, he had been arrested 11 times, 3 times for robbery, a gun charge, 2 assaults, and a murder. While in prison, he became OG Deadeye, and Portee became OG Mack. They became the leaders of the UBN, United Blood Nation. They began to unify individual African American criminal groups inside the prison, and the birth of the nation was officially July 16, 1993. The two OGs called a meeting in building G73 on Rikers Island, and OG Mack convinces everyone that they could achieve miracles if they worked together. OG Mack then writes the UBN Bible called the 31. It had their rules as well as commandments, such as we will have no snitches and we will have no rapists. Never discuss our issues with outsiders, and then they began to reshape the prisons. They decided to tie a red bandana around the phones and realized that if anyone got out of line, they would get $1.50. They called their disciplinary cell the Bing for Bing Cherry. He called his goons his dogs, DAWG, and he would release his dogs on people if they got out of line. They were not allowed to have tats, so they used a cigarette to burn 3 marks, and they called them dog paws. They began to win against the Latin Kings, and they formed their own sign language so guards didn't know what they were doing and what attacks they were planning. In 1994, after 18 months in Rikers, stabbings and slashings increased to 1,100 a year. The word about the UBN began to spill out on the streets, and his numbers grew very fast. Most cops never thought this could happen in New York City. He was doing all this from inside the prison of Rikers Island. And then he got out. In 1999, he was released, and by this time, he was OG Mack, the leader of the UBN. He was like an underworld politician in how he operated, and he returned home to his original set, the 1A Tray in the Bronx. He had a camera and begins to interview people and ask questions he deemed only true bloods would know. He quizzes them on the rules from the 31, and a lot of folks that didn't know the rules, he would send his OGs out to pass out $150s. He created an empire in just a couple years. He had a strong ability to bring people together and to lead. He made people commit crimes in order to get initiated, as well as get beat in for 31 seconds. They call it blood in and blood out. It meant you had to spill blood to get in, and you had to spill blood to get out, aka death. When they got blood in, they had to buy the 31. Lots of tats with the 5-point star began to emerge, and each point represented the 5 points of knowledge: body, unity, love, lust, and soul. He organized like an army, and he had his leaders called generals. Generals had green light status, which gave them the ability to blood in new members without asking permission. It helped them to grow fast, but they were still under OG Mack, and it gave the generals a lot of power as well. Female members were called bloodettes. They had the option to sex in, as well as they could get beat in. They were led by OG Mack's girlfriend, Paulette MacArthur, aka Big Mama. They focused on credit card theft and identity fraud. OG Mack ordered them to get pregnant and produce more bloods called blood drops. When a baby is born, a blood drops, they are automatically a blood. OG Mack tried to make money by selling hats and shirts that said 1A Tray. He tried to rap and create a rap DVD, and he tried to make a life story and sell it, but neither were very successful. The UBN began to expand down the East Coast to Maryland, North Carolina, as well as Florida. Crime from credit card fraud to murder had UBN's name all over it. Something that started in Rikers Island was now in 7 to 8 states in just a few years. Cops began surveillance on them. They decided they wanted to cut the head off the organization, and by the year 2000, the UBN was a monster, and the FBI was now involved and ready to try to take them down. In the summer of 2000, for federal racketeering charges, the FBI had their eye all over the UBN. OG Mack was a leader and made people feel a part of something, and the feds used that against him. They decided to hit him with federal RICO charges, Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organization Act. It was originally for organized crime, and it was rare for gangs. RICO allowed cops to get leaders for acts committed by their underlings. The cops began to look for informants and had around 30 people they were watching. Each person they had to review their criminal history, and it kept them very busy. OG Mack came out in a New York Times interview and claimed that they were the new Black Panthers and they were about doing good for the hood. He tried to change the image of the Bloods. The cops didn't buy it though. The investigation revealed that he was the actual shot caller and leader of the UBN, and he was tied to many crimes. In the spring of 2001, under sealed indictment in a grand jury, they indicted OG Mack and 14 members with 31 criminal acts. The number of counts matched the number of rules, coincidentally. The feds arrested all their targets at the same time and used an informant to set him up. They know who everyone was and where they stayed, and they had an open investigation for over a 2-year period. They had the informant set him up on his birthday. They had the informant bring him to a party, and the informant told him there would be women, weed, drinks, etc. And the law had around 200 people waiting for him once he arrived. When he was arrested, he was cool as ice and didn't want to talk to them and said, "Do what you gotta do." He was sent to Rikers Island, but this time he was put in solitary. The cops were on a fast track to put him away, and then 9/11 happened. Everything grinded to a halt. The feds eventually picked up the case again in the spring of 2002, and by then, more people flipped and the cops had a lot more evidence against him. His trial lasted 2 months. He would laugh and talk in his lawyer's ear often during the trial, and it seemed that he wasn't taking it too serious. He was facing weapons charges, racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, and conspiracy to distribute crack cocaine. He was eventually found guilty on all charges, and at his sentencing, he told the judge that she was like a doctor who could save his life, but instead, she gave him 60 years, which is almost life. He was shell-shocked at the time, and he was sent to Florence, Colorado Supermax prison, right in the middle of where he started in LA and where he ended in New York. Colorado is a Supermax prison where some of the most violent prisoners in the U.S. are sent. Now, he sits between where he started and ended with 60 years to think about that journey and how he ended up where he is. Cops eventually went to the old 1A trade neighborhood and put up papers and posters showing how much time he got and said that they would get the same fate if they follow in the path of Omar Portee. Well, that's the end of the Omar Portee story. What do you think about that? It's amazing some of the talent that people have and how it's misused. It's unfortunate that he wasn't able to use his charismatic leadership skills and the ability to bring people together to do more positive in this world and in his life. In the end, it's unfortunate to see another person with extreme talents use it and waste it and end up either dead or in jail. It's the same story that we have heard and seen again in the same way, and hopefully people in the future or people listening to this video will realize that if they do have similar talents, maybe they should use it in a positive way so that they can actually make a real change for the positive in life. In the end, I think that this man had a lot of God-given ability to bring people together, and it's unfortunate that he wasn't using it in a positive manner where it could have really made long-lasting change in this world. You all let me know what you think about this story and about Omar Portee, aka OG Mack. He is still alive, serving the 60-year sentence, which was 600 months. And what do you think about people like him? I know it's a similar story. I'm interested in your comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Peace. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit that like, subscribe, bang that bell, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.